Video cut short on the last one. Apologize for that, memory. If you're following in the book, we would be at page 113, and I'll start from Remember That God, and I'll wait for everybody to catch up. And let's see, and yeah, in Kindle, it's also page 113. It'll be at the bottom of that one and like I said, I'll be starting at Remember That God. I'll give you a second so you can pause the video, locate, and we'll get started again. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Remember that God had no problem telling Paul that he would not take away his thorn. He tells all of us to know quite often. God doesn't worry that his boundaries will injure us. He knows that we will take responsibility for our lives, and sometimes no helps us do just that. Myth number 5. Boundaries mean that I am angry. Brenda had finally mustered up the courage to tell her boss she was no longer going to work weekends without pay. She had asked for a meeting, which had gone well. Her boss had been understanding, and the situation was being ironed out. Everything had gone well except inside Brenda. It had begun innocently enough. Brenda had itemized her issues with the work situation and had presented her view and suggestions. But midway through her presentation, she had been surprised by a sense of rage welling up inside. Her feelings of anger and injustice had been difficult to keep hidden. It had been slipped out in a couple of sarcastic comments about the boss's golfing Fridays, comments that Brenda had no intention of making. Sitting at her desk, Brenda felt confused. Where had the anger come from? Was she that kind of person? Maybe the culprit was these boundaries she'd been setting. It's no secret that quite often when people begin telling the truth, setting limits, and taking responsibility, an angry cloud follows them around for a while. They become touchy and easily offended, and they discover a hair trigger temper that frightens them. Friends will make comments like, "You're not the nice, loving person I used to know." The guilt and shame caused by these remarks can further confuse new boundary setters. So, do boundaries cause anger in us? Absolutely not. The myth is a misunderstanding of emotions in general. The anger, specifically emotions or feelings, have a function. They tell us something. They are a signal. Here are some of the things our negative emotions tell us. Fear tells us to move away from danger, to be careful. Sadness tells us that we've lost something, a relationship, an opportunity, or an idea. Anger is also a signal, like fear. Anger signals danger. However, rather than urging us to withdraw, anger is a sign that we need to move forward and to confront the threat. Jesus' rage at the defilement of the temple is an example of how this feeling functions. John 2, verse 13 to 17. Anger tells us that our boundaries have been violated, much like a nation radar defense system. Angry feelings serve as an early warning system, telling us we're in danger of being injured or controlled. So that's why I find myself hostile to pushy salesmen, Carl exclaimed. He couldn't understand why he had a hard time loving sales personnel who couldn't hear his no. They were attempting to get inside his financial boundaries. Didn't start my timer. Um, it was simply okay. Inside his financial boundaries, and Carl's anger was simply doing its job. Anger also provides us with a sense of power to solve a problem. It ensures to protect ourselves, those we love, and our principles. In fact, a common Old Testament illustration of an angry person is someone with a hard breathing nose. Imagine a bull in a ring, snorting and pawing, getting the steam up to attack, and you'll get the picture. However, as with all emotions, anger doesn't understand time. Anger doesn't dissipate automatically if the danger occurred 2 minutes ago or 20 years ago. It has to be worked through appropriately. Otherwise, anger simply lives inside the heart. This is why individuals with injured boundaries are often shocked by the rage they feel inside when they begin setting limits. This is generally not new anger, it's old anger. It's often years of no's that were never voiced, never respected, and never listened to. Um, the protest against all the evil and violations of our souls sit inside us, waiting to tell their truths. The scriptures say that the earth quakes under a servant who becomes king. Proverbs 30, verse 21 to 22. The only difference between a servant and a king is that one has no choice and the other has all choices available to him. When you suddenly give those who have been imprisoned all their lives a great deal of power, the result is often an angry tyrant. Years of constant boundary violations generate great anger. It's very common for boundary injured people to do some catching up with anger. They may have a season of looking at boundary violations of the past that they never realized existed. Nathan's family has was known in his small town as the idea family. Other kids envied him growing up, saying, you're lucky your parents are so close to you. Mine couldn't care less about me." Feeling a great deal of gratitude for his close family, Nathan never noticed that his family carefully controlled differences and separateness. No one ever really disagreed or fought over values or feelings. I always thought conflict meant a loss of love, he would say. It wasn't until Nathan's marriage began suffering that he began questioning his past. He relative his naively married a woman who manipulated and controlled him. Several years into the marriage, he knew it was in serious trouble. But to Nathan's surprise, he was not only angry at himself for getting into this mess, but also at his parents for not equipping him with tools for handling life better. Because he genuinely loved the warm family in which he was raised, Nathan felt guilty and disloyal when he remembered occasions in which his attempts to separate from his parents and set his own limits were constantly and lovingly frustrated. Mom would cry about his argumentiveness. Dad would tell Nathan not to upset his mom, and Nathan's boundaries remained immature and non-functional. The more clearly he saw that this had cost him, the angrier he felt. I made my own choices in life, he said, but life would have been a lot better had they helped me learn to say no to people. Did Nathan remain angry at his parents forever? No, and neither do you have to. As hostile feelings surface, bring them to relationship, confess them. The Bible tells us to tell the truth to each other about our lacks so that we may be healed. James 5 verse 16. Experience the grace of God through others who love you in your anger. This is a first step towards resolving past anger. A second step is to rebuild the injured part of your soul. Take responsibility for healing the treasures that may have been violated. In Nathan's case, his sense of personal autonomy and safety had been deeply wounded. He had to practice for a long time to regain this in his primary relationships. But the more he healed, the less anger he felt. Finally, as you develop a sense of biblical boundaries, you develop more safety in your present. You develop more confidence. You are less enslaved to the fear of other people. In Nathan's case, he set better limits with his wife and improved his marriage. As you develop better boundaries, you have less need for anger. This is because, in many cases, anger was the only boundary you had. Once you have your no intact, you no longer need the rage signal. You can see evil coming your way and prevent it from harming you by your boundaries. Don't fear the rage you discover when you first begin your boundary development. It is the protest of earlier parts of your soul. Those parts need to be unveiled, understood, and loved by God and people. And then you need to take responsibility for healing them and developing better boundaries. Boundaries decrease anger. This brings us to an important part about anger. The more biblical our boundaries are, the less anger we experience. Individuals with mature boundaries are the least angry people in the world, while those who are just beginning boundary work see their anger increase. This passes as boundaries grow and develop. Why is this? Remember, the early warning system functions as danger. We feel it when we are violated. If you can prevent boundary violations in the first place, you don't need the anger. You are more in control of your life and value. Tina resented her husband coming home 45 minutes later to dinner every night. She had a hard time keeping the food hot. The kids were hungry and crabby, and their evening study schedule was thrown off. Things changed, however, when she began serving dinner on time, with or without her husband. He came home to refrigerated leftovers that he had to reheat and eat alone. 3 or 4 seasons like this prompted Tina's husband to tear himself away from work earlier. Tina's boundary, eating with the kids on time, kept her from feeling violated and victimized. She got her needs and the kids' needs met, and she didn't feel angry anymore. The old saying, don't get mad, just get even, isn't accurate. It's far better to say, don't get mad, set a limit. I like that. Let's see. Myth 6. When others set boundaries, it injures me. Randy, I'm sorry, but I can't lend you the money, Pete said. This is just a bad time for me. My best friend Randy thought to himself, um, I come to him in need and he refuses me. That's a blow. I guess that shows me what kind of friendship we really have. Randy is preparing to embark on a life of boundarylessness with others. Why? Because being on the receiving end was hurtful to him. He even made an emotional vow never to put anyone else through his experience. Many of us are like Randy. Having someone say no to our request for support leaves a bad taste in our mouth. It feels hurtful, rejecting, or cold. It becomes difficult to conceive of setting limits as being helpful or good. Having to accept the boundaries of others is certainly not pleasant. None of us enjoy hearing the word no. Let's look at why accepting others' boundaries is such a problem. First, having inappropriate boundaries set on us can injure us, especially in childhood. A parent can hurt a child by not providing the correct amount of emotional connection at the appropriate time. Children's emotional and physical needs are primarily the responsibility of the parent. The younger the child, the fewer places he or she can go to get those needs met. A self-centered, immature, or dependent parent can hurt a child by saying no at the wrong times. Robert's earlier memories were of being in his crib alone in the room for hours at a time. His parents would simply leave him there, thinking he was fine if he wasn't crying. Actually, he had moved past crying to infant depression. This now created a deep sense of being unwanted, which followed him into adulthood. Second, we project our own injuries onto others. When we feel pain, our response is to disown the bad feelings and to throw it onto others. This is called projection. Quite often, people who have been hurt by inappropriate childhood boundaries will throw their fragility onto others. Sensing their own pain in others, they will avoid setting limits on others as they imagine how devastating it would be to them. Robert had extreme difficulty setting nighttime limits with his 3-year-old daughter. Abby, whenever she could cry about having to go to bed, he would panic inside, thinking, I'm abandoning my daughter. She needs me and I'm not there for her. But actually, he was a wonderful father who read stories at night, prayed, and sang songs with his little girl. But he read his own pain in her tears. Robert's injuries kept him from setting the correct limit on Abby's wish to keep him singing songs and playing until sunrise. Third, an inability to receive someone's boundary may mean that there is an overdependent relationship. Kathy felt wounded and isolated when her husband wouldn't want to talk at night. His silence resulted in feelings of severe alienation. She began wondering if she was being injured by her husband's boundaries. The real problem, however, lay in Kathy's dependence on her husband. Her emotional well-being rested on his being there for her at all times. He was to have provided everything that her own alcoholic parents hadn't. When he had a bad day and withdrew, her own day was a disaster. Though he certainly need though we certainly need each other, no one but God is totally indispensable. When a conflict with One significant person can bring us to despair. It is possible that we are too focused and dependent on that person to meet our needs. Such dependency is appropriate for children, but they have to grow out of this in adulthood and move into having several healthy and supportive relationships. It tends to slow down our personal and spiritual development. Ask yourself, if the person I can't hear no from were to die tonight, to whom would I go? It's crucial to develop several deep, significant relationships. This allows those in our lives to feel free to say no to us without guilt because we have somewhere else to go. When we have a person who can't take no from, we can't take no from, we have in effect handed over the control of our lives to them. All they have to do is threaten withdrawal, and we will comply. This occurs quite often in marriage, where one spouse is kept in emotional blackmail by the other's threat to leave. Not only is this no way to live, it doesn't work either. The controllers continue withdrawing whenever he or she is displeased, and the boundaryless person continues frantically scrambling to keep him or her happy. Dr. James Dobson's Love Must Be Tough is a classic work on this kind of boundary problem. Highlight. Fourth, an inability to accept others' boundaries can indicate a problem in taking responsibility. Randy, who needed a loan from his best friend, is an example of this problem. He was making Pete responsible for his own financial woes. Some people become so accustomed to others rescuing them that they begin to believe that their well-being is someone else's problem. They feel let down and unloved when they aren't bailed out. They fail to accept responsibility for their own lives. Paul strongly confronted the Corinthians in a letter that had since been lost. He set limits on their rebelliousness. Even if I caused you to sorrow by my letter, I do not regret it. Though I did regret it, I see that my letter hurt you, but only for a little while. Yet now I am happy, not because you were made sorry, but because your sorrow led you to repentance. 2 Corinthians 7, 8, verses 8 through 9. The Corinthians accepted and responded well to Paul's boundaries. Whatever they were, that's a sign of taking responsibility. Remembering Jesus' golden rule here is helpful. In everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. Matthew 7, verse 12. Apply it to setting limits. Do you want others to respect your boundaries? Then you must be willing to respect the boundaries of others.